My fiance asked for a break because of a new guy. That's the moment everything shattered for me. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 29 years old, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had my whole future lined up. I was engaged to Claire Roberts, the woman I believed I would spend the rest of my life with. We had been together for 4 years. We'd picked out rings, started planning a wedding, even talked about where we wanted to buy a house one day. If you had asked me then, I would have said Claire was my safe place, my forever. That illusion broke on a Tuesday night. I remember because it was nothing special. We had just finished dinner at home. I was clearing dishes, and Claire was unusually quiet. She kept fidgeting with her phone, glancing at me, then looking away. Finally, she set it down, folded her hands on the table, and said she needed to talk. My stomach dropped before she even said the words. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady, like she had rehearsed this. She told me she thought we should take a break. At first, I didn't understand. A break from what? We lived together. We were engaged. A break sounded like something high school kids did, not two adults about to get married. I asked her what she meant, and that's when she said it. There was someone else. His name was Derek Grant. He worked at her law firm. He was older, successful, the kind of guy who wore tailored suits and drove a car I couldn't afford in my dreams. She said she wasn't cheating, not technically, but she felt something with him that she couldn't ignore. I just sat there, staring at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me it was a terrible joke. But she didn't. She went on to explain how she wanted to explore her feelings, how she wasn't saying goodbye to me, not yet, but she needed space to figure things out. She used words like honest, confused, and temporary, as if those could soften the blow. I don't know how long I sat there in silence. My ears were ringing, my hands shaking under the table. I kept thinking, we were supposed to be planning a wedding, not talking about trial runs with another. A clean break would have hurt, but this was worse. She wanted to keep me waiting, like a backup plan, while she tested the waters with him. When I finally found my voice, I asked her if she loved him. She didn't answer right away. That pause told me everything I needed to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed we shared, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathing next to me as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted with every part of me, had already left in her heart. I realized then that the life I thought I had wasn't real. It was built on something fragile, and with one conversation, it all came crashing down. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I could never look at Claire the same way again. The days after that conversation dragged like a punishment. The apartment, once a place where I felt comfortable, turned into a box that pressed against my chest. Every corner carried reminders I couldn't escape. The mug she always used, the blanket we picked together, the framed photo on the nightstand. I stopped turning on the lights because the shadows at least gave me some relief. Sleep refused to come. I would lay down, close my eyes, and my mind would replay every word she had said. My chest tightened with every imagined picture of her with him. When the sun came up, I dragged myself to work, but I was useless. Reports piled up on my desk, phone calls went unanswered, and even simple tasks felt impossible. My manager gave me sympathetic looks, but pity was the last thing I wanted. I leaned on friends at first. They invited me out, bought me drinks, told me she didn't deserve me. I nodded, tried to smile, but deep down I felt exposed, like everyone knew my private shame. Some tried to convince me she would come around, that it was just a phase. Their words made me feel worse, because I could sense the truth. They were trying to protect me, but they didn't believe it themselves. Meanwhile, she didn't vanish. Claire sent short messages here and there. Hope you're okay. Thinking of you. Maybe we can talk soon. None of them answered the real question. Where did I stand? They kept me dangling, unable to move forward, yet unable to close the door. Each time her name lit up my phone, my chest leapt before crashing down again. She was keeping me just close enough to not let go, but far enough that she could explore her shiny new world with. One evening, I drove without a plan, just needing to get out of the apartment. My hands moved on their own, steering me across town. That's when I saw it. Her car parked outside a polished restaurant, the kind with valet parking and candlelit tables. Through the glass I caught a glimpse. Claire, her hair done up, laughing across the table from Derek. He leaned in close, comfortable, confident. It looked like a date, not a trial, not confusion, not some pause she had fed me. The sight punched harder than her words. She hadn't just stepped back to think. She had already chosen. And there I was, still holding on to scraps, waiting for her to make up her mind while she played house with someone else. I sat in my car for a long time, watching from a distance, until I couldn't take it anymore. The shame, the anger, the ache, all of it fused into one decision. I couldn't stay here, not in this city where every street corner carried her name, where every memory taunted me. Staying meant drowning slowly while she built a new life in plain sight. That night I drove home, walked through the apartment one last time, and knew it was over. Not just us, but this entire place. If I wanted to breathe again, if I wanted to feel like a person instead of a ghost, I had to leave. I didn't give warnings or explanations. One morning before the sun came up, I opened the closet, pulled down my suitcases, and started filling them. Shirts, jeans, shoes, toiletries, whatever fit went in. The rest I left behind. Furniture, dishes, all the things we had picked out together stayed exactly where they were. I wasn't going to waste one more ounce of energy dividing up what belonged to who. By the time the light broke through the blinds, I had locked the door for the last time. I didn't leave a note. She didn't deserve one. I drove south with no map, no plan, just the urge to put as many miles between us as I could. Somewhere along the endless highway, I remembered a city I'd once dreamed about but never visited, Austin, Texas. I'd seen pictures, heard stories about the food, the music, the people. It wasn't home, but that was the point. I needed a place where every street wouldn't remind me of her. When I arrived, I booked a week in a budget motel and started searching. It didn't take long to find a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, just a single bedroom, cracked tiles in the kitchen, a view of the parking lot, but when I turned the key, it felt like mine. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without feeling a knife twisting in my chest. Money was another issue. I needed steady work, something to occupy my hands and mind. I applied to dozens of places and landed a job with a construction management company. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me structure. I learned the rhythm quickly. Mornings on-site, afternoons with blueprints and calls, evenings covered in dust but too tired to brood. The crew welcomed me without asking questions I didn't want to answer. There was Mark, always cracking jokes during breaks, and Kevin, quiet but dependable, the kind of guy who'd help you lift without being asked. They didn't pry, and I liked that. Their easy acceptance built a small corner of stability I hadn't realized I needed. Still, no matter how many hours I worked or how many boxes I unpacked, I carried the same storm inside. Nights were the hardest. I'd sit on the bare couch, staring at the empty walls, thinking about how easily she had tossed aside everything we built. The anger hardened into something sharp, a promise to myself. I would never again beg for scraps of affection. I would never again let someone string me along like I wasn't enough. Austin gave me distance, but not peace. The city buzzed with life, street musicians playing under neon signs, food trucks lined up late at night, joggers circling the lake at dawn. Around me people laughed, flirted, lived. I walked among them like a shadow. Part of me envied them, but another part of me drew strength from the fact that life could keep going, even if mine had been torn apart. Every step forward felt heavy, but it was still forward. I hadn't healed, not even close, but I had planted myself somewhere new. That was a start. The weeks in Austin stretched into months, and I forced myself into a new rhythm. My body still carried restless energy every night, so I signed up at a gritty boxing gym a few blocks from my apartment. The place smelled of sweat and leather, the walls covered in faded posters of champions. At first, I barely knew how to wrap my hands, but the trainer showed me, and soon I was pounding the heavy bag until my arms shook. Each punch felt like a release, a way to silence the storm inside me. Work filled most of my days, but after hours, I found myself writing. Not polished essays or anything I'd show another soul, just raw pages in a notebook I kept under my bed. I wrote down the moments I couldn't say out loud, the images that haunted me, the questions that never had answers. Putting them on paper didn't solve anything, but it kept me from exploding. Through all this, I wasn't completely alone. A guy from work, Jake Collins, started hanging around more often. He was a couple of years older, with a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard when I least expected it. We grabbed beers after long days, talked about music, sports, women, everything except the part of my past I wasn't ready to share. He didn't push, just kept me laughing and reminded me what normal felt like. Then came Maya Lopez. I met her on a Friday evening at a small coffee shop I ducked into after work. She sat across from me at a crowded table when there were no other seats left. At first, I gave short answers, avoiding eye contact, but she had this way of drawing people out. Sharp wit, quick comebacks, a light in her eyes that made it hard to look away. She told me she worked long shifts as a nurse, and even though she was tired, she still laughed easily, as if the world couldn't break her spirit. I told myself not to get carried away. After everything, I kept a wall up. When she asked about me, I deflected, kept it surface level. Still, she didn't seem put off. She teased me, called me too serious, and before I knew it, we were talking for over an hour. By the time we parted, she handed me her number without hesitation. I didn't call right away. Fear and doubt gnawed at me, but eventually I gave in. One dinner turned into several. She had a way of disarming me, making me laugh when I didn't think I could, challenging me when I tried to hide behind silence. Slowly, I started letting pieces of myself slip out, pieces I thought I'd buried. One night after walking her to her car, I caught myself smiling, really smiling, not the fake kind I'd forced before. It startled me. For so long I'd felt nothing but bitterness. But here was someone who made me feel alive again. Still, underneath it all, the fire hadn't burned out. Thoughts of Claire and Derek lingered like smoke after a blaze. I could laugh with Maya, spar at the gym, share stories with Jake. But when I lay down alone at night, the betrayal crept back in. I was learning to build something new, yet the old wounds still whispered, reminding me of what had been stolen. Time passed, and with it came small stretches of quiet. I was beginning to think the past had loosened its grip when an unexpected call jolted me back. The voice on the other end belonged to an old acquaintance from my hometown. We hadn't spoken in ages, so I knew something was up. After some catching up, the conversation turned toward her. My friend told me things had taken a bad turn. The man she had chosen over me wasn't who she imagined. Beneath the polished image, he showed a darker side, sharp words, tight control, constant suspicion. People whispered about his temper, about how he treated those close to him. There were also stories of other women, quiet meetings behind closed doors, late-night absences she couldn't explain. I listened in silence, every detail cutting and healing at the same time. On one hand, hearing about her unhappiness lit a spark of grim satisfaction. She had gambled on someone who looked shiny on the outside and long. On the other, it stirred the ache I thought I'd buried. I didn't want her back, God no. But knowing she had once looked at me and still chosen him made the wound sting all over again. For the rest of that day, I walked around with a storm in my chest. Work felt mechanical, and I barely heard what anyone said. By the time I got home, the weight sat heavy enough that Maya noticed the change instantly. She had a gift for reading moods, and I couldn't hide it from her. We sat across from each other at my kitchen table. She studied me quietly, not pushing, just waiting. Finally, she asked what had me so tense. I hesitated, then told her about the call. I left out most of the details, but she understood enough. Her response wasn't what I expected. No judgment, no advice, just a question soft but direct. What would closure look like for you? The words hit me harder than anything else that day. Closure. I hadn't thought of it that way before. I'd told myself I was moving forward, but truthfully, I was carrying the past like a shadow. I stared at her, unable to answer right away. What did closure even mean for me? Seeing her again? Saying things I never got to say? Or was it something else? Something only I could give myself? Maya reached across the table and touched my hand, her eyes steady on mine. She didn't press for answers, just let the question linger. In that silence, I realized I couldn't keep running from the pieces I hadn't faced. Whatever closure meant, I needed to figure it out before the past poisoned everything new I was building. That night, long after Maya left, I sat awake with the word echoing in my head. Closure. It felt both impossible and necessary, like a door I was afraid to open but couldn't avoid forever. It took me a long time to make the trip back. The thought of walking familiar streets, seeing places tied to memories I'd tried to bury, kept me away. But eventually I knew I had to face it. Closure, that word Maya had planted in my head, kept circling until I couldn't ignore it anymore. One weekend I packed a bag, got in the car, and drove north. Crossing into my hometown felt strange. The gas stations, the corner diners, even the cracked sidewalks looked exactly the same, yet I felt like a stranger moving through them. My plan was simple: visit a few old friends, maybe stop by my parents, and then leave before the past could claw too deep. It didn't go that way. On my second day there, I stopped by a small grocery store to grab a drink. I pushed my cart around a corner, and there she was, Claire, standing by the produce section, holding a basket, hair tied back loosely. She wasn't the image etched in my mind. Gone was the polished, confident woman I remembered. She looked drained, eyes heavy, posture slouched. She saw me before I could slip away. Her face froze, then she forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Ethan," she said, voice soft, almost cautious. I gave a polite nod, nothing more. She tried to talk casually at first, asking how I'd been, saying it had been a while. I kept my answers short. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, carved by everything that had happened. After a few strained exchanges, her words shifted. She admitted things hadn't worked out the way she imagined. Derek, the man she'd left me for, wasn't the dream she once painted him as. She spoke about his temper, his jealousy, his coldness. For a second, I caught a flicker in her eyes, a mix of embarrassment and longing. She said she wondered if she had made a mistake, if maybe she had thrown away something real. Listening to her, I felt no triumph, no anger, no urge to argue. The storm that once consumed me had quieted. I wasn't the broken man she had left behind. I stood there, calm, steady, hearing her without letting her words pull me under. When she paused, waiting for me to say something, I finally met her gaze. "You chose your path," I told her. "So did I." Nothing more. Her lips parted like she wanted to respond, but no words came. The silence between us said everything. I reached for my cart, gave a small nod, and walked away. Each step felt like I was closing a door that had been left open far too long. By the time I reached my car, I realized I felt lighter. Not happy, not sad, just free. I didn't plan on revenge, at least not in the usual sense. But sometimes, it doesn't take shouting or breaking things to make a point. Sometimes, the most cutting answer is silence. After that chance encounter at the store, I decided to meet some friends at a local bar one evening. It was the kind of place we'd gone to back in the day: dim lights, sticky tables, a jukebox humming in the corner. I walked in with Maya by my side. She had on a simple dress, nothing flashy, but she drew attention anyway, not because of looks alone, but because of the way she carried herself. Confident, warm, like she belonged anywhere she went. We found a booth, ordered drinks, and before long we were laughing. Her wit was quick, sharper than mine, and she had a way of tossing playful jabs that made the whole place feel lighter. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man with baggage. I felt like myself again. That's when I saw them, Claire and Derek. They slipped in through the side door, her hand tucked in his arm. My pulse quickened, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned back and let Maya finish her story. She was talking about a wild night shift at the hospital, and I chuckled at her animated reenactment. A few minutes later, voices rose near the bar. Derek's tone was sharp, laced with impatience. He accused her of flirting with someone who had barely glanced her way. She tried to hush him, but he pressed harder, his words spilling loud enough that the whole room caught on. Chairs shifted. People turned to watch. Claire's face flushed as Derek kept needling, each sentence stripping away her composure. I didn't move. I stayed in my seat, hands wrapped around my glass, eyes fixed on Maya. She noticed the commotion too, but she focused on me, like she knew I needed the anchor. Around us, whispers spread. Claire's carefully crafted image cracked in front of everyone. Eventually, Derek stormed toward the exit, leaving her standing there with nothing but stares from strangers. She tried to gather herself, straightened her jacket, and then her eyes drifted across the room. That's when she saw me. I didn't speak. I didn't nod. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, listening to Maya laugh, smiling at her the way only someone free of the past can. The contrast was brutal, and she knew it. Her gaze lingered for a moment, heavy with regret, before she turned away. That was the revenge, not anger, not confrontation, but the undeniable truth laid out in front of her. She had traded me for someone who tore her down in public, while I sat across from a woman who lifted me higher than I thought possible. She saw it. Everyone in that bar saw it, and I didn't have to say a single word. Back in Austin, the distance from that night gave me clarity I hadn't expected. For so long, I thought getting even meant proving her wrong, throwing her choices back in her face. But it turned out, I didn't need grand gestures. My life itself had become the answer. Revenge wasn't about shouting or making her feel the pain I carried. It was about not needing her approval anymore. The power she once held over me had slipped away, and with it, the weight I'd been dragging for months. Maya's presence grew into something steady. She wasn't just someone I spent time with. She started to weave into every part of my days. We planned little trips together, weekend drives through the hill country, afternoons spent exploring food trucks and hidden trails. She made me see the city through fresh eyes. It wasn't just a place I had escaped to anymore. It became a home. Introducing her to Jake felt like a turning point. He had been my anchor in those early months, the friend who kept me grounded. When he met Maya, the two of them clicked right away. Watching them banter over barbecue, teasing me like they had known each other for years, gave me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time since my world cracked apart, I looked around and realized I was exactly where I wanted to be. Laughter came easier. Days felt lighter. I found myself looking forward instead of glancing back. Yet even with this new happiness, I couldn't pretend the past hadn't left a mark. At night, when the city quieted and the journal came out, the truth spilled onto paper. I admitted to myself that betrayal had carved a scar I'd always carry. Trust didn't come as easily as it once did. Part of me stayed guarded, careful in ways I never used to be. But writing it down didn't feel like drowning anymore. It felt like acknowledgement. I wasn't running from it, and I wasn't letting it control me. I was simply accepting that what happened had changed me, and that was okay. Sitting on my balcony with Maya's laughter echoing from inside, I realized life had a strange way of teaching lessons you never asked for. The pain had nearly broken me, but it also pushed me into a place where I could rebuild on stronger ground. And in that rebuilding, I found something better than revenge. I found freedom. Months passed in a steady rhythm. Work kept me busy, Weekends with Maya filled the gaps, and evenings were spent in a quiet balance I'd never known before. Then, out of nowhere, her name lit up my phone. It wasn't a short note this time. It was long, paragraph after paragraph pouring out on the screen. She wrote about missing me, about memories she couldn't shake, about how she wished things had played out differently. There were mentions of mistakes, of regret, of wondering if there was any chance to start over. I sat at the kitchen counter staring at it. For a moment, the words blurred together, a flood of emotions from a voice I hadn't heard in months. I read through the message once, every line thick with longing, but when I reached the end, I felt nothing like the man she expected to find. No temptation, no aching pull backward, just a hollow kind of clarity. The truth was simple. I wasn't that person anymore. The man who would have clung to her, begged for another chance, cried himself to sleep, no longer existed. Pain had burned him away. What stood in his place was someone who had already built a new life, one that didn't need her to survive. I didn't respond. I didn't type out a single word. My thumb hovered for only a second before I hit delete. Watching the screen clear felt like closing a door for good. There was a strange calm that followed. Not joy, not triumph, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop carrying something heavy you should have dropped long ago. I realized then that even if she had shown up at my door, even if she had begged face to face, I wouldn't have let her back in. The wound had scarred over, and I wasn't about to tear it open again. That night, I sat out on the balcony, the air warm against my skin, Maya laughing inside while she cooked something on the stove. I thought about how far I'd come from the man who once believed his world was over. I thought about how she had tried to pull me back into a chapter that was finished, and how easy it had been to walk away this time. For the first time, I felt completely free. Looking back, I can admit there was a time I thought I wouldn't survive it. What happened nearly broke me, tore me down until I didn't recognize the man in the mirror. The betrayal hollowed me out in ways I never expected, and for a long while I believed I'd never climb out of that hole. But leaving changed everything. Driving away from the wreckage gave me the distance to rebuild, piece by piece. It wasn't quick, and it wasn't painless, but every choice I made on my own terms stitched me back together. The strength I carry now didn't come from clinging to what I lost. It came from walking away and proving to myself that I didn't need the person who threw me aside to feel whole. People think revenge has to be loud, that it has to hurt the other person in some obvious way. For me, it turned out to be quieter. It wasn't shouting, it wasn't plotting, it wasn't watching her downfall. It was the refusal to let her decide my value. The real revenge was finding a life where her opinion no longer mattered, where her presence or absence had no control over me. I learned to measure myself differently, not by how much someone else loved me, but by what I built for myself after everything crumbled. That realization was the turning point. I didn't need to erase the past to move forward. I just needed to stop letting it chain me down. Telling this now, I don't want pity. I don't want sympathy. I don't even want applause. I share it because I know what it feels like to be left in pieces, convinced that your best days ended with someone who betrayed you. I know how heavy that emptiness can be. But I also know what it feels like to put one foot in front of the other until you find yourself in a place where you can breathe again. The truth is, the most powerful answer to betrayal isn't rage or revenge in the traditional sense. It's refusing to let the person who hurt you write the end of your story. It's proving, to yourself more than anyone else, that you're more than what they walked away from. Starting fresh didn't just save me, it reshaped me. And that, more than anything, is why I can sit here now, not bitter, not broken, but free. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given them another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.